Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to talk about our full moon. And it is going to be tomorrow, Tuesday morning, 1:51 a.m. Hawaii time, so 4:51 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And this full moon is happening in the very last degree of sidereal Scorpio. So this is what we call the Gandanta point. And this is a karmic knot. It's a point that comes between all the water and fire signs. And if you think about the zodiac beginning at Aries and ending at Pisces, you can see that that first Gandanta is between the end of all the signs and the beginning of all the signs. And then the next one is between Cancer and Leo. And then the one that we're traversing for this full moon is between Scorpio and Sagittarius, which could arguably be considered the most tumultuous of the two. Of the three, because first of all, the moon is debilitated in Scorpio. And this is our second full moon in Scorpio. So we're particularly lucky this time around. We had our first one in very early degrees of Scorpio, actually right where the moon was debilitated, where the moon is debilitated. And now this one is in the very last degree, which, as I'm saying, is the Gandanta point. And so the theme that we're having to work through here extra is this theme of releasing our fear around others. Scorpio comes naturally in the cycle behind Libra, where we are relationally harmonious, where we want to be relationally harmonious, where we want to get along with others, where we want to make things fair. And Scorpio is where we start to realize that we've made whatever compromises we've made, and we are now tied to this person through more than just, romance and love. But generally, when we get into the realm of Libra, we're actually making like contracts with one another. There's needs that are being met, and people are showing up in that way. So it's beyond just the romance and the love affair. It's moved into the world of agreements and things that each person needs to do to show up for that relationship. And this isn't just romantic relationships. This can be business partnerships. This can be, any two adults who have mutual needs on the table. Well, once you enter into that, there's a level of trust that's huge. And depending on our various trauma, depending on our various histories, we might have a lot of trouble holding that trust. And we also might have a tendency to see how other people act or behave and associate it with things in our own mind from our past, from our shadows, from whatever we've experienced. And maybe not even just in this lifetime, maybe in previous lifetimes as well. And so what often happens is we then blow up this idea in our head of what's actually going on, what's actually happening. And we, in our efforts to remain in control, or, we never were in control, but to pretend that we're in control, will, maybe lash out at the other person or take efforts to control their behavior. This is one of the biggest qualities of Scorpio, is control. It's and it's coming from fear, right? The only reason you would ever want to control another person is because you would be afraid that they would leave you, or disobey you, or not do what you need them to do, because your fear has convinced you that this is what you need them to do. So the issue of control is vast within this sign. And as I said, the full moon we had a month ago was at the very beginning, and it was an eclipse, right? So we also had to work with the nodal point, which was in Libra already. So carrying in that relational quality. And now we've got ourselves at the end in the star called Jyestha. And Jyestha is the eldest star. And if you remember 2 weeks ago during the new moon, I didn't actually do a video, but I did an article, and I spoke about the story of Rohini. This was a new moon in Taurus that was in the star called Rohini. And Rohini is the most beautiful of all the nakshatras. She is the sister wife who's most coveted by the moon himself. She's also most coveted by their father. Jyestha is across from Rohini, and she is the eldest. She is the one who's been around the longest. And while she might not be the most coveted or the most beautiful, she's the one who's in charge, right? She's the one who is given the responsibility and also the command. And this is an important thing to understand about being in charge of something or being in control of something, is that it's a huge responsibility, right? When you take on power or you take on control of something, you have to upkeep that. If you fall at any point or falter at any point, people will cast you out of that role of leader very quick, and new leadership will be brought in. So the role of leader is one that is always in a state that is tentative. They can always be overthrown. And the control and the, part where we want to make people do what we want them to do can become the very thing that ends up being our own demise, or the thing that brings you down off of whatever leadership pedestal you've been standing on. So this is a star that's ruled by Indra, who is the king of the gods. He is the foremost, the chief of the devas, who are the entities that are moving towards light. Right? In the Hindu mythology, it is the devas who are of light, it is the asuras who are of the darkness, but they are both needed for the balance of powers in this world. The asuras keep us down to our more desire nature within our ego, maybe our greed, our lust, our gluttony. The devas help us move towards our higher, more pure state. But the devas do plenty of manipulative things, and they have plenty of blunders and ways in which they keep their control or their power, or bring it back to the balance of power. And the asuras are often quite devotional. We'll see that there'll be qualities where they will transcend, and when their demise comes, they'll fold back into consciousness, or they'll go up to the higher realms, because they have this deep devotion towards source within themselves. So the different myths will play this out, and one of them in particular around Indra shows that he gets a little bit haughty. He gets a little too proud. He becomes a little too confident in his role as the eldest or the chief. And he sort of dismisses his guru. Brihaspati is the guru of the devas, and he's associated with Jupiter. Venus is the guru of the asuras. And it's important to understand that we need both these things, right? We need to be able to seek higher truths and wisdoms that are timeless and that will carry us through any given situation. But we also need to be able to deal with others in the here and now, just as we might, so you've probably heard a statement like, if you think you're enlightened, get in a relationship, or if you think you're enlightened, go visit your family. The truth is that while we can have these really amazing spiritual practices, beliefs, and tenets that we subscribe to, if we can't carry them into our actual relationships, then they don't mean that much. If we can't actually use them and integrate them into our lives, then they're not really that functional after all. So this situation with Indra is that he sort of disses his guru. And as such, Brihaspati leaves the devas, and the balance of powers shifts, and the asuras begin to take a lot more power. And so Indra has to fix this problem. He's created a problem. And he does that by, starting this thing with the asuras and trying to get this special magical armor. And it's kind of a long story. I'm not going to tell the whole story right now. But in the end, what happens is that he gets himself up against a monster named Vitra, who has all the water of the earth within himself. And Indra has to then muster up the courage to go down into this cave where Vitra is stuck because he's so full of water, and he has to puncture the monster and let all the waters go back to the world. This is similar if you think about water as being emotion, which it really represents, that element represents the emotions. And one of the reasons why Scorpio is so tumultuous is because it's an emotional sign that is ruled by Mars. So it's emotions, but there's that aggressive quality and that logic oriented of it's like this or it's like this. If it's not like this, it's like this. And that can really get us into a situation where we start to have imagined fears. We start to blow things up into these monstrous proportions where they become so big that there's almost no way to fight them anymore. And we have to come up with this insane amount of courage and be the chief most of gods to get down there and find a way to return the emotions to where they originally were, which was spread out and held by Earth, as opposed to all bottled up in this one monstrous demon that's now stuck in a cave. So when we look at all the different layers in the stories, they often bring us into a different perspective or a different state of mind. The stories and the deities are really like portals of consciousness with which we can enter and have an experience of our own nature. Because ultimately, all of the teachings are teaching us about our own nature. It's not about these gods that are outside of us that we're praying to, as much as it is the reflection of our own inner landscape and how we relate to the world around us. So I'm going to share my screen so that we can see the actual chart, because I know one of the things that's going to come up for people watching this is, isn't it a full moon in Sagittarius? And this is something that we haven't really had to deal with for a while because the full moons have been aligned with Western astrology. The answer to that is no. The moon is not in Sagittarius, even though people might want it to be. If you actually were to take a telescope and look at the sky, you would see that it's not quite there yet. Each of the signs take up 30 degrees of space. And the 2915 that our moon is at the end of sidereal Scorpio. And sidereal zodiac is based on the fixed stars. So essentially, where things are now is the same as where they were 4,000 years ago, because it's based on a fixed star placement and how that planet, that orb that we're talking about, in this case, we're talking about the moon, is actually in that location. Western astrology is based on a tropical seasonal zodiac, which is more to do with like a calendar. And so over time, that shifted to be off the placement of where things are. So it's fine. You can pray to whatever you want to pray to. You can, be excited about whatever kind of full moon you want to be excited about. But one of the things I really appreciate about Vedic astrology and really all the Vedic sciences is alignment with truth. I like things to be as closely aligned to truth as possible. For me, finding out that something isn't actually in a certain place, well, then why would I be honoring that? I want to honor something that is where it is. And I think this particular little detail is important here because it's the difference between already being ready to start the next phase and still being stuck in this place we are right now. And really, if anything, this full moon is representative of a way in which we are all stuck right now. We're stuck in this knot. Gandanta is the knot. It is karmic knot. And it doesn't have anything to bring it into the next sign. When we end a water sign and go into a fire sign, none of the 27 nakshatras, the stars that make up the Vedic zodiac, link us to the next sign. So it's a break. And at that break, there's a knot, which means we can't just fluidly move into the next section. Well, the way the sections work is that Aries to Cancer is a section of self. These are self-interested signs. Of course, for each of us, we're going to have our rising sign somewhere else. My rising sign is Taurus, so my fourth house is Leo. And in my chart, that will show my first 4 houses will be of self within the signs that they are. But if we're looking at the natural zodiac and the natural first house and the natural 4th house and the natural 5th house and 8th house and all of those things, Aries is the natural first house and it's a fire sign and it goes into Cancer. And then Leo to Scorpio is others, dealing with relationships, one-to-one relationships with mutual needs on the table, where we need to figure out how to compromise and work with another human. And then the final realm from Sagittarius to Pisces is the universal realm. And this is where we take everything we've learned in our, self and others section and bring it to a bigger stage where it relates to everybody, where it relates to society, where it relates to truth itself. And that would be the reason that Sagittarius and Pisces, both ruled by Jupiter, are what's flanking this section. You start off with your inspiration and beliefs. And in Sagittarius, you're going out in the world, you're finding cultures, you're finding religions, you're finding spiritual practices, and you're integrating them. You're bringing them into your confirmation bias, your belief system that already got laid. And if it's not a solid belief system, you want to uproot it, which is the first star of Sagittarius. Is called Mula. It's the root. We want to uproot it. It's ruled by Nariti. It's chaotic. And that's where the moon will go immediately after this full moon. We want to get rid of anything that's not working. And then the next star, we would want to plant seeds with discernment of something that does meet truth, something that is aligned with higher truth, so that we can make a better choice going forward. But we're not there yet. And I think this is one of the biggest problems we have in our spiritual world. And I have no doubt that a lot of it has to do with how much lineage has been lost. In the Western traditions, particularly, lineage was burned, right? It was burned, buried, and forgotten. And so many of these ancient practices coming back in a Western fold are not linked exactly to the way they were before. They're being unearthed in their own way and brought forward. But in the Western mindset, where we use a Gregorian calendar, where things are off, where nothing is really aligned with nature, we're always just a little bit off in the West. Whereas the Vedic lineage maintained the test of time. It lasted. While there was, of course, patriarchal influences moving in and various different invading forces, they managed to maintain the knowledge and wisdom and move it a little, move it around, have male priests do tantric rituals, have, the goddesses move to the outskirts of society and just bring in the more domesticated and easier, more palatable goddesses. There were ways in which to move this knowledge around and still maintain it. And so for that, there is this through line where we can still tap into this wisdom, and it still works today without us having to sort of stick a pin in something or suspend our disbelief. So this particular section, this universal section, we're not quite ready for it yet, right? We can't jump into, this is our philosophy on life, and these are our teachings, and this is our high belief system, if we haven't yet dealt with the trauma and drama and our imagined fears. And that's the thing that people really like to bypass the most, right? Is it's like, I mean, no one really wants, as much as everyone loves a good full moon in Scorpio, nobody really wants to deal with their stuff. Nobody really wants to dive deep into the shadows and really reckon with it. We think we do, and people do ceremonies and all kinds of other things to try to integrate this shadow. But oftentimes when it actually comes up in our real relational settings, we dismiss it, ignore it, or bypass it in favor of a nice, clean, pure teaching that will solve all our problems. And we can just ignore the fact that we feel the way we feel. But our emotions are not in line with whatever we want to believe. Our emotions are actually going to be felt until we're able to clear them so that we have new emotions, and new emotions of things like peace or tranquility or happiness, as opposed to the anxiety of stuffing everything down and trying to just keep going because we want to keep up with the pace. I mean, I think of that as also being a very Western concept, is this sort of, we have to get somewhere, we have to be somewhere. So, I teach yoga, and I often see that in classes where people will just bypass their own body, clearly telling them not to do something to get to the next pose. And I have to constantly remind people to get back into their body, get back into their breath. There's nowhere you need to be. You can stay with yourself. Don't lose yourself. But in our society, we're really not shown anything about staying with ourselves. Nothing about the way we were brought up really showed that to us. So we have to learn it for ourselves as adults. We have to reparent ourselves and remind ourselves, oh, it's okay. We can have this feeling, and we can actually sit with the feeling, and we don't need to get to the next place before we feel this feeling fully. And there's nothing wrong with us for having this feeling. And this feeling is our feeling, and it's not necessarily the other person's feeling, right? And whatever we think their feeling is might also not be their feeling. Whatever we think their experience might not be their experience either. And this is the big lesson of Scorpio, because there's a lot of illusion and delusion here, where we think things are a certain way and we go off on them. We get really crazy about it. And even volatile or violent or aggressive in that way, because Scorpio has that sting first quality. I don't know, I'm in danger, I could get crushed, I could get killed, like sting, let's attack first. And so this is where we really need to dial into ourselves in this full moon, is recognizing where we're stuck, what emotions we're stuck with, and then allowing ourselves to just breathe into that, as opposed to pushing ourselves to be at the next place, pushing ourselves to be at Sagittarius when we're still in Scorpio. And allowing ourselves to own the fact that anything we've worked hard enough for, even if all our work was just aging, just having spent that time, like if you work somewhere for many years and you have seniority there, or if you are the oldest child in your family, or whatever, however you've found the different places in life where you rank as eldest or as somebody who is in a position of power, recognizing everything you've done to get there, all your hard work, and also noting that it's scary, that you've put so much into it and that you have to continue to put so much into it in order to upkeep it. And is that worth it to you? Like, is it something that you want bad enough, or is it a control issue? Is it something where you just don't want to lose the control because you're afraid? And B, are you still acting in integrity? Are the choices you're making coming from a place of ego, or are the choices you're making coming from a place where you're really serving, whoever you're leading or whatever entity or enterprise you're leading? So these are things we can ask ourselves in this time. As most of you know, we had Mercury go direct and we had Saturn go retrograde in this period of time since our new moon in Taurus. When we had that new moon in Taurus, Mercury was retrograde right on it. In this case, Mercury's across from the full moon, giving what we call drishti. It's an energetic exchange, and the moon and Mercury are passing it back and forth, and the sun is also, right? In a full moon, the sun and moon are always in that mutual gaze, in that drishti. Now, Mercury's degrees are quite a bit off. It's only at 6 degrees here. So we have a big gap in this gaze. It's not a direct gaze. When the degrees are tight, it makes a much bigger difference to our experience. But we can see that just the direct forward motion of Mercury, as opposed to that new moon cycle that set us off on delayed communication and possibly confused communication, just that direct forward motion presents us with a situation where we can be clear and precise in our speech. It's in Taurus, where we're grounded, but also kind, where we want the other person to understand us. We're wanting harmony, similar to Libra, because it's ruled by Venus. We're wanting harmony in our communication, but we're also grounded in an earth sign where there's practical, words and steps that need to be taken in order for that communication to take place. And it's in a star called Kritika, which is ruled by Agni, who's the god of fire. And fire is the element that helps us see. It's also the element that helps us offer up. In the story around Agni, there's the deity Swaha, and we often will say that when we're offering things to the fire, Swaha. It's this quality of turning whatever material thing we have, or whatever fear we have, whatever concept we have, whatever actual physical material thing we have, sending it to the fire and allowing it to become a message up to source, allowing it to become transformed into something that is an offering and a prayer. So there's a spiritual quality to Kritika, and it's also the cutter. So it's where we're literally cutting out the fat. There's a reason why the moon is exalted in Kritika, and it is because it's getting rid of all the excess emotion, while Scorpio is adding more and more emotion, more and more water into this monster. Taurus is grounded and not as engaged in the emotions, and Kritika is cutting through the crap, quite literally, to see what really is, to see what's really true. So we have this opportunity with our communication to be clear, to be honest, to be integral, and to be kind and connective, which is important. We still have Venus, our relational planet, and the ruler of this Mercury and Sun in Aries, and she's moving towards the end of Aries, but of course that means she's moving even closer to Rahu. So there can be this real exacerbation of what's going on in relationships. Particularly with Venus in Aries, there's a lot of selfishness in relationship. There's a quality of whatever I need is the most important thing, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time worrying about what everybody else needs or how my actions affect other people. So this is one thing that can be challenging here. The best remedy for it is really focusing on our own self, not just in relationship, because it's hard to focus on how we are in relationship. It's easier to focus on who we are. What are we doing? So going back to that, taking a step with our emotions, taking a breath with our emotions, allowing ourselves to sit with them, and really trying to discern for ourselves, because Mercury isn't just about communication to others, right? It's about our own intake of information and how we categorize that, how we organize it in our brain. So can we use this as an opportunity to see clearly what's actually going on and to make changes and shifts within ourselves that will ultimately fix our relationship problems, whether it's with the immediate people that we're dealing with or future people that we deal with. Those steps that we take of discipline, of courage, of allowing ourselves to really dive deep into what needs to shift within ourselves and in a physical way, because often our emotions can only shift when we make physical choices first. So that's another thing about Scorpio that can be challenging, is this emotional, uproar. And then sometimes there's a physical backlash from it, like the sting of a scorpion. Whereas if we showed up on the front end and were disciplined and, did our exercises every day, and we would get out a lot of that frustration, we'd get out a lot of that anger, and we'd naturally feel more calm and more temperate. So this is a good opportunity to explore that, especially because Mars, the ruler of both Scorpio and Aries, is still in Pisces, joined Jupiter. And there's a lot of wisdom running and a lot of capacity to act in the direction of what we believe and what our connection to source is. So whether that's meditation, whether that's prayer, whether that's, dream work or medicine, whatever that looks like for you, you have an opportunity to be a spiritual warrior in this case. And to really use that black-white thinking of Mars to make choices, physical choices for yourself in your own life, as opposed to trying to discipline everyone else and tell everyone else what they should be doing. So it's a good opportunity to really look at ourselves. And then, of course, Saturn retrograde is very low degrees, right? He's now moved down to 1 degree because by July 12th, he's going to be back in Capricorn. And Saturn just moves at this really snail pace that is painful in many ways. But that snail pace is asking us to slow down. It's that thing. Instead of getting all excited and fighting this dragon and this demon and doing all these crazy things, it's like, take a breath, slow down. You have eternity, literally. And at the same time, you have no time at all. It'll all be done in a flash. So there's this quality of time with Saturn and the need to take more of it. And when Saturn's going retrograde, we are questioning what we've committed to. And often what we've committed to has come from an emotional knee-jerk reaction or a trauma or some kind of shadow or confirmation bias we have. We committed to something because we didn't think we could wait for something that was more aligned, or it had enough of the qualities of what we wanted where we were like, okay, that's it. Whether it's a person, whether it's a relationship, or whether it's a job, or whether it's, what it is will really depend on what Saturn is for you. What 2 houses are Capricorn and Aquarius for you? These are Saturn's 2 houses. If you're an Aries rising, it's your 10th and 11th house. If you're a Taurus rising, it's your 9th and 10th house. This is going to have a lot to do with, your career and your teachings and what you're bringing out into the world for Aries and Taurus people. But for Cancer and Leo people, this is their, 7th house is Aquarius for Leo, and Capricorn is the 7th house for Cancer. So it's going to have to do with your relationships. So for each of the rising signs, and for Capricorn and Aquarius, it's going to be their rising sign. It's going to have to do with their actual identity. So for each of these 12 rising signs, it's going to dictate a different area of your life that's coming up, and where these commitments are, what the commitments are reckoning around, and how you're needing to unravel and wind back and take some time to really note where the foundation of what you've committed to might be faulty. Maybe there's something that wasn't laid out well in the beginning because you wanted whatever the thing was so bad, you sort of skipped over something else. And it's the lesson of this full moon in so many ways, is slow down. Take your time. Stop when you feel something. Stop when you feel trauma. Don't just bypass it. Because when you do that, the signals you're sending to your brain are that we just shove that stuff down. We just shove that stuff down and keep going. And that the most important thing is getting somewhere, as opposed to being somebody who feels whole or centered or peaceful. When in the end, the main goal for all of this, in the Vedic thinking, is Sanatana Dharma, is eternal truth. We're all trying to release all the lies and all the, dramas and sort of big, blown up, out of proportion things. And we're trying to get rid of all the baggage so that we can get back to the kernel of truth that we already hold, that we already know. So rushing isn't going to get us there, because where we're trying to get more of is here, in here, not out there. There's not a place we're trying to get. It's a place within ourself we're trying to receive and remember and stay with. And so this full moon is really reflecting that in many ways. It's showing us the ways in which in Taurus we might bypass things just because we want everything to be comfortable. We want things to be peaceful. Well, just go, make yourself a snack. I'm a Taurus rising. Make yourself a snack, take a bath, do something to feel better. But maybe we don't always want to feel better. Maybe feeling better isn't the goal. Maybe the goal is to heal whatever it is that's coming up, because it'll keep coming up again and again if we don't. Just like Scorpio came up again for us here as a second full moon. So this Gandanta point, this little, slice of the sky, which is the last degree of the water signs and the first degree of the fire signs, is really a place for us to stop. And if we can untie that knot. Otherwise, we're just going to keep hopping over and skipping it and coming back to it again and again and again, which is also fine. It's exactly however it's meant to be. However your path is perfect. But if now feels like a time when you're ready to start, really diving deep and not bypassing yourself and not jumping forward and saying, oh, I'm ready for this thing, or, well, I know that's not really where it is in the sky, but that, but I like it, or Sagittarius is a fun sign, or whatever it is we think, and we really want to get real and we really want to sit with the truth of what is, then this is a beautiful time for that. And even just sitting in meditation where you're not even doing some kind of complex meditation, but just having your hand on your heart and your other hand on your solar plexus can be very powerful. It's the meditation I often do in the end of my yoga classes, because there's the heart, the anahata, and the manipura, the solar plexus, really is that shift from the lower chakras into the upper ones. So it's where we're elevating ourselves. And it's also where we're dealing with the issue of control, right? The control, the dominion and control of the solar plexus and my will. And I want it to be this way because I want the circumstances to come out the way I want them to, right? I want things to unfold the way I want them to. But the thing is, the joke's on us, because we never know how it's going to unfold. We never know what step we're going to take today, how it's actually going to lead tomorrow. So the more we try to control it does not mean that we get more of what we want. It just gets us more of what we think we want, which sometimes is not. So if we can relax into the heart then and say, okay, I feel my fear. I feel the fact that I want control over this. I feel how badly I want the outcomes that I want. And yet I'm willing to trust. And yet I'm willing to surrender. And yet I'm willing to say, I don't even know where any of this will end. But honoring our feelings is a way to tell our body, to tell our nervous system, to tell our brain, it's okay no matter what. No matter what monsters we think are before us, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. This too shall pass. So this is the wisdom of this full moon. And I hope this is helpful for you. If you would like to know where Saturn falls in your chart, I have a report for all 12 rising signs. It shows what houses Aquarius and Capricorn are for you, and discusses like how this transit, because Saturn's been in Capricorn since January 2020, and it moved into Aquarius April 28th, I believe, of 2022. And now he's already retrograde and already moving back into Capricorn, and he won't move officially back into Aquarius until January of 2023. So I kind of discuss that for each of the 12 signs in that report. And I also have one for Rahu and Ketu in their respective axis in Aries and Libra, and Jupiter and Pisces. These are all the long transits, the transits that are a year or more. I often do these reports for. So if you are interested in finding out that information, you can go to www.radhahomeyoga.com. There'll be a link below, and you can sign up for the newsletter and get those free reports. And if you like this video or the article, you can share, comment. Anything you do helps me help you. Have a blessed full moon. Namaste.